The first and most immediate problem is the lack of vaccine. In India, the absence of procurement, we could have done more, we didn't. So many people in the informal sector have had very precarious jobs. Lockdowns have hurt them. From 39.5% of the workforce being employed, we've gone down to 36.5%.
So my first question to him is, how does he assess the vaccination program in the world so far? Does he believe this is the magic bullet which will get us to neutral this crisis? Is there a difference between the developed world and the developing world? Is there a better paradigm of vaccinations which can help us return to a near normal position? So, Professor Rajan, if you could take us through that first.
Yeah, well, let me preface this by saying I'm not an epidemiologist, and I sort of have absorbed as much as everyone has, given our need to do this. I mean, the reality is that it's a very unequal vaccination program in the world, both across countries and within countries, right? The countries that were savvy, that had effective governments, went about procuring the vaccines early, most effective being Israel, which didn't actually manufacture any of it, but procured it very early on. It's a small country. And they went about vaccinating everybody. The problem, of course, is the virus morphs. And so what worked against the first versions, the first variants, is less effective against later variants. So it's not, it turns out, just a question of vaccinating everybody you can as early as possible. You also have to worry about booster doses. That's something the United States is thinking about now, having vaccinated most of the people who are willing. Now, what are the problems that we see across the countries? The first and most immediate problem is the lack of vaccines, right? You see this hugely in Africa, but you've also seen it in India, the absence of procurement. We could have done more, we didn't. The second is the rollout itself, which you pointed to. Some of the countries in Africa have received vaccines, but rolling it out has been quite difficult because of the lack of logistics. I think we've done a better job, certainly in India, than some of those countries, given our facilities. The third is overcoming vaccine hesitancy and all the fake news surrounding vaccines. And that's a job even in the industrial countries. In the US, so many states are hugely under-vaccinated, and they're experiencing a much stronger flow of the Delta virus, precisely because people are rejecting the vaccines for a variety of sources of misinformation. The Trumpistas are doing it for one reason, and the African American population is doing it sometimes because they've had a historical suspicion of government programs on the medical front. So I think you need to overcome all this, but even then you're not done, because the virus keeps changing. What is sorely lacking, I would argue the biggest thing that's lacking in the world is a sense of global leadership on this. There is so much need. So much could be produced with so little investment, if there was much more of a global sense that we need to do this fast and no one is safe until everyone is safe. That hasn't permeated. Countries still think that they can become safe on their own without ensuring that the broader public is safe. So a lot needs to be done. We are seeing various governments looking good at some point, looking bad at other points. This is not a virus which is which boosts government egos. It tends to deflate them, and I think that's pretty clear across the world.
What we are seeing in India is a much larger formalization of the economy, where the organized corporate sector seems to be virtually colonizing sector after a sector. I'm deliberately using a stronger word, colonizing, because with post it happened a bit in demonetization. We saw the beginning of that in demonetization. But with the pandemic, what we've seen is that the informal sector has virtually collapsed. The corporate sector, because of its very high digital abilities, has been able to stay afloat and has virtually picked up market share from the informal sector. So now what we are seeing is a massive formalization. Corporate profits have gone up dramatically, but the informal sector is in pain. Now, on a normal day, formalization of the economy is a good thing. But in an abnormal situation like we are going through, how good is it? And is there need to calibrate that?
Well, you hit on a very important issue, right? If you look at the stock market in India, people would ask, what pandemic? There's nothing. And the reality is that's the tip of the iceberg, and it's a very well-to-do tip of the iceberg. If you look at upper skilled services, many people have been able to work from home. The incomes are assured. There's really no problem there, and that's the formal tip. That is the consultants, the lawyers, the investment bankers, and so on. And that's very healthy right now. The problem is what lies beneath. And so many people in the informal sector have had very precarious jobs. Lockdowns have hurt them, their ability to work. You can see gold loans go up. Gold loans going up is a concern, because our households don't part with their gold until they're in dire straits. You see these consumption surveys. Consumption has fallen, and of food, and that's another worry. If you look at unemployment, basically from 39.5% of the workforce being employed, we've gone down to 36.5%. That's 3% of the employment to population ratio has fallen by 3%. That's a huge number. If you think of the number of people involved, it's many millions. So this is something we have to pay attention to, because you can see that this is longer term. This will affect demand. What you're seeing initially is the higher level discretionary demand has sort of still stayed firm. A four-wheeler, demand for cars. Look at two-wheeler demand. That has not been as healthy. Look at the bottom of the rung two-wheelers, the kind of stuff that entry-level people buy. That's fallen really tremendously. That's suggesting inequality within the country has increased. Now, formalization broadly is a good thing if you allow the informal sector an easy way to become formal. Right. But if the informal sector survives because of its informality, and as soon as they start paying the taxes, etc., they simply cannot survive, then what you've done is you force them to formalize at the worst time. Longer term, this makes sense. But forcing them to formalize when the whole economy is being hit means basically they close down. And the extent of damage in the SMEs, we've had a whole bunch of moratoria. We simply do not know. When we reopen, we will find the true extent of damage. How much, how many of these can pay? How many will sort of sit on land and machinery, which they simply cannot use because they have no access to working capital. So I think we need to think more carefully about what's underneath that tip of the iceberg and focus on what that needs to come back when the economy comes back. Now, don't be deceived by a rebound. You go down a lot, you're going to rebound just because people come back to the office, come back to work, etc. That rebound looks spectacular because we went down spectacularly. It looks like, this year we're going to go 10%. Wonderful. When did we ever grow 10%? But we went down to 8.5% or 9% last year, or, 7% according to the official statistics. So the question is, going forward, are we going to get back to that 6.5% growth? What do we need to do that? If you've got a large segment of the population without jobs, dipping into poverty, with their kids not learning, that's not a recipe for strong growth. You can talk a lot about the formal corporate sector, but it's the rest that is also needed in order to supply the demand for that formal corporate sector. That's not going to come back easily.
We are truthful, unafraid and independent because of you. Now you can help our reporting from the ground. Go to thequint.com, click Become a Member tab, choose a plan and pay. Because the truth is worth it.